Sheikh Uthman ibn Fudio said in his Ihya Sunnah wa Ikhmaru Bid'ah, he said there are three prerequisites of tajdeed. There are three negations or things that you shouldn't do if you're involved with tajdeed. The first one is to be preoccupied with the faults of people. That the duty of the mujaddid is not to go around counting how long your jalabi is and how long your beard is or how many hairs you've clipped off of your mustache, or sister, your thobe is not long enough, or your hijab is not covering your left eye. That's not the duty of the mujaddid. The duty of the mujaddid, first off, is that he is not to be preoccupied with the faults of other people. He assumes the best of people. He becomes like what Ahmed Ubaba, when he was describing his teacher, the mujaddid in the 10th century, Muhammadu Bagyugu, he said that he felt that the only evil there was ignorance. That was the only evil, and that every other evil resulted from ignorance. And it was his duty to remove ignorance from the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he looked at them with good and he saw the inner core of that person. Another scholar by the name of Abdul Qadir Dantafa, one of the great scholars of Nigeria, the grandson of Sheikh Uthman ibn Fudio, he said, I took an oath with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I would look at creation with the same eye that Allah looked at creation when he decided to create them, with pure mercy. And he would say, and this was regardless whether that person was Muslim or kafir, I would have the same opinion. I would look at his ruh and see his ruh, that his ruh is from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and my duty is to remove the disbelief from him, to remove the ignorance from him. This is a profound way of looking at things. And when you have this type of opinion, you can't help but be successful, and you don't alienate people. He says, Sheikh Uthman says, وَمَنْ كَانَ مَقْصُودُهُ حَتْقَ أَسْتَارِ النَّاسِ وَاشْتِغَالُ بِعُيُوبِهِمْ فَاللَّهُ حَسِيبُهُ وَسَائِلُهُ لأن من يتبع عورات أخيه يتبع الله عوراته حتى يفضحه ولو في جوف بيته والمؤمن يلتمس المعاذير والمنافق يتبع العيوب والله في عون العبد ما دام العبد في عون أخيه. Here Sheikh Uthman ibn Fudio gives the first principle of the mujaddid. He says, he whose objective is to tear the veil between Allah and the slaves and to be involved with people's sins, to be preoccupied with people's sins, Allah Ta'ala will reckon with him and will question him on the day of judgment. He says, because whoever follows after the faults of his brother, Allah will follow after his faults, even into the recesses of his home, until he reveals what's going on in his home. He says, because a believer always adheres to excuses for his brother, and the munafiq, the hypocrite, always searches after faults. And Allah is in assistance of the slave as long as he is in assistance of his brother. And it says in the Muwatta, لا تنظروا في ذنوب الناس كأنكم أرباب وأنظروا في ذنوبكم كأنكم عبيد. In the Muwatta, and this is related from Isa ibn Maryam, where he said, do not look into the faults of people or the faults of people as though you were lords, but rather look into your own faults as though you were slaves. And Imam As-Sulami said in his book, Kitab Uyub al-Nafs, he said, وَمِنْ عُيُوبِهَا اشْتِغَالُهَا بِعُيُوبِ النَّاسِ وَعَمَاهَا عَنْ عُيُوبِهَا. And among the faults of the self is you being blind to your own faults and being preoccupied with the faults of others. So this is the first principle of the mujaddid. And every one of you and every one of us whose job, and remember, that's what we're here for. Because we know, you have to realize that if you made immigration from the lands of Islam to the lands of disbelief for reasons of dunya, that you're in a state of disobedience. This is the law. This is what our scholars have said. We have to call a spade a spade. And the only thing that would change your disobedience is you be involved with calling people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and giving life to his deen. That's the only thing that's going to make it justified for you having your six-digit account and your Lexus and your job at IBM and Oracle, is that you're calling people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if you came here for the dunya, that's all you're going to get, and you're going to wake up and that dunya is going to be a nightmare for you. You're going to wake up and you're going to lose your family. You're going to lose your daughter. Your son is going to have his hat on backwards with his pants dropped down below his behind singing rap music. He don't want to speak Urdu no more, and he don't want to go to Pakistan. If you try to get him back, he's not going to go. That's if you don't call the people to the deen. If you stay here, your children will become what you secretly worship. What's inside of your heart, what you're making tawaf around, your children will become that, and you will lose your family. And the only way to save your family is that you have to go out and call the people to the deen. In order to call the people to the deen, you have to have a good opinion of people. You have to assume the best of people. You have to see that kafir, that person who's a non-Muslim. You have to see him as a potential Muslim. You have to see his ruh, his essence, which is slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because every ruh is knowing of Allah and is a slave of Allah. Is the person who has that ruh doesn't know it. That's why he's called kafir. One who covers up. He's covering up his ruh, his essence, which is a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your job as a Muslim is to uncover that. And that is the purpose of tajdeed.